I wrote about ADHD and how I feel like it's a modern day band-aid on today's children. My thesis statement is society needs to take ADHD more seriously because children are being misdiagnosed and treated for a disease they don't have. Schools are using labeling children with the disease to their advantage, and modern day tolerance for the way children should behave is making the disease a pandemic. And it seems that in this day and age, ADHD is common and over-medicated disorder. Modern day children are being prescribed medication to control undesired behaviors. The doctors need to stop being so quick to prescribing these innocent children narcotic drugs just to fill their pockets, and our children's lives are at stake because ADHD is not being taken seriously and being mass misdiagnosed and treated. The misdiagnosis is not just happening to our children. Our adults are being misdiagnosed with ADHD as well, and it's dangerous to prescribe someone a stimulant drug that is used for ADHD. The effects are similar to cocaine and meth, and it causes people to be manic, impulsive, and it also causes insomnia. So imagine our children being prescribed those kind of drugs they don't even need. Children are also being misdiagnosed with ADHD because just the education system is lacking. It makes you wonder if pharmaceutical companies and doctors have some kind of deal going on, maybe the government. Studies have been tested and research continues to be made. Michigan State researched the prescribed misdiagnosis, and the results are rather alarming. Of the nearly 1 million children who are misdiagnosed a year, 320 to $500 million a year are wasted on unneeded medication for these children. So not only are children being treated with drugs that they don't even need, and we don't know the long-term effects of what's going to happen to them, the government is being robbed as well as families. Of the $500 million, $90 million came from state-funded medical programs. So, other than age being a consideration for misdiagnosis, studies show that childhood trauma also can be mistaken and identified as ADHD because the similarities are very same. When a child experiences trauma, they can have anxiety, depression, agitation, aggression, defiance, and learning difficulties. And these symptoms are easily mistaken for ADHD symptoms, resulting in more misdiagnosis. Partnerships have been made between mental health workers as well as counselors to ensure children are getting the treatment they need for this experienced trauma versus being labeled as a disorder. This is in British Columbia. Obviously not here in the US, which is sad. We know there's not a proper diagnosis for ADHD, and children suffer in school daily. There are families out there with childhood cases of ADHD that are so severe they get aid from the state just to help treat and care for them. However, these cases go through an extensive process of being diagnosed before they receive disability funding. Shouldn't all cases be this extensive? Shouldn't we make these cases that extensive, not just to receive funding, but to receive medication? You would think. In 2005, there were several deaths in Canada of young children from Adderall. It was temporarily taken off the market, but put back on. And my reasoning is because the stimulant is safe and effective when the diagnosis is legit. The school system is using the ability to aid in diagnosing children with ADHD to their advantage. Todd Elder of Michigan State economists created a study about the misdiagnosis of the disease at hand. ADHD is by far the most common diagnosed behavioral disorder for the kids in the U.S. I mentioned above that nearly 1 million children were misdiagnosed with a disease a year, and that's out of 4.5 million diagnoses in children under the age of 18. That's almost 25%, and that's an extreme red flag. Elder's study tested the fault of misdiagnosis due to an age difference, and he used the sample of 12,000 children in kindergarten. 60% of the younger children in the kindergarten class were most likely to be diagnosed with ADHD in comparison with their 6-year-old peers. You would think that the early education system and professionals in public school system would have some knowledge about developing children. Children are learning to regulate when they enter kindergarten, and some of the kids don't even have previous preschool experience. I advocate that instead of pushing the disease and narcotic stimulants for unexperienced regulating children, we put some of those millions of dollars that I mentioned above spent on drugs and use those to create more public preschool programs. That potential $90 million government-funded harm could easily be changed into harmless education conditioning for our young kiddos. A child can only gain from this standpoint. I'm I'm running out of time. And then society's expectation of how children act play a big factor in children being this misdiagnosis with the disease. I mean, you have working parents that really just don't have time for children, and they kind of get brushed to the side, and they become more of a nuisance than our kids, because our life is consumed around the economy, and the society has lost focus on family, and everybody's just so career driven. And that's the difference between ADHD diagnosis in this day and age and how it used to be. You think about older families, kids stayed at home with their mom, and they were raised with their family values. Now kids are being tossed from daycare to grandparents to school to daycare to even on the weekends. They sometimes don't get to stay home with their families, and some of them have single parent families. So I mean, it makes a difference in how a child is raised in society. Plays a big factor in how a child acts. So understanding that just because your kid is acting out might not because they have an ADHD disorder. It could be they just starve for attention. They need their mom or their dad. My biggest problem with this essay was trying to find the rebuttal. I don't even want to read that part of the essay because it's awful, because every time I researched something that disagreed with how I felt or my reasoning, I would just find more reasons why my understanding was legit. The things that I could find, that ADHD is problematic, and if it's not treated and it can be misdiagnosed and it goes into adulthood misdiagnosed, that also has a harmful effect on our society because people who are never treated for the disease can grow up and use recreational drugs to try to regulate. Those are going to become your drug addicts. Those are going to become your criminals, and they're not going to succeed in school because they can't. And that becomes a vicious cycle with their children, and that's kind of how things happen. So it might be misdiagnosed in children, but then there are people that fall through the cracks as well. So that's an issue at hand. The school system can be a parent saving grace when it comes to ADHD, because some parents don't know how to look for problems in their children because they're not exposed to other children. So they don't know that their child is maybe indifferent from others. So the school system does have programs for teachers to be educated on ADHD and know what to look for. So not all schools use ADHD to their educational advantage. Some education systems in certain areas are for the children. That was another rebuttal. But the message is that we need to take the disease more serious, just as serious as a fatal one. It may not be a deadly disease, but it could very well lead to deaths if not properly diagnosed. Misdiagnosed children can potentially be prescribed medication they don't need, with a possibility of death. Children who get misdiagnosed or overlooked with ADHD can potentially have problems with development that grows into trauma. They then become unstable adults, resorting to self-medicating. Self-medicating leads to crime and death, and this is not a subject that should be ignored or taken lightly. I'm out of time. That's it.